Welcome to our Bhagavad Gita study. How's everyone doing? Good? That good? It's nice to be back. So, what verse did you all discuss last time? 2.58. And what did you discuss? You discussed about a turtle? Tortoise? What does it? Being able to control our senses. What does controlling our senses mean?
Not shutting down your senses, but using them in the right way.
Okay, so not shutting down our senses, but using them in the right way, right? So channelizing it, yeah. And if we remember back to the 54th verse, this whole section, Arjuna is asking questions. And he wants to know that one who has found divine happiness, one who is truly transcendentally situated, how does one achieve that? Because Arjuna, we know at the beginning of this Bhagavad Gita, was in a state of distress, anxiety, fear, so much turbulence in the mind. And nobody enjoys that. Anybody enjoys turbulence in the mind? We enjoy that about as much as we like turbulence in the air, right? And neither are very settling. And so Krishna is speaking about this person in divine consciousness, this Stita Prajna. And Arjuna wants to know a lot about this person. So one of the main themes in this last section of Bhagavad Gita is this point of sense control. And Krishna explained that the characteristics of one who has achieved this divine consciousness, there are two characteristics. Anybody remember what they are? This is probably going back a few weeks. But there are two qualities or two characteristics by which we can understand one who has achieved this divine consciousness.
The way he walks, the way he speaks.
Okay, so those are the questions Arjuna asked. Yeah, so how does he walk? How does he speak? What's his mentality? But in answering the question, what are the symptoms of one? That was the first question Arjuna asked, right? What are the symptoms of one who has achieved this? Krishna gave two things, right, in the next verses that describe this. Anybody remember? Calm-minded. Yeah, so that is the result, right? We saw that verse, sage of a steady mind. Right? So one is steady in the midst of distress, in the midst of some happiness. The sage, one who has controlled the mind, is steady in consciousness. Right? So, but if you remember, Krishna said that one who has achieved this divine consciousness, it says there is no material desires. There is no material desires. And then the next situation is one who has no material desires. Does that mean they have no desires at all?
They do have, but
They do.
no desire to the materialistic world.
That they're not to the materialistic world. And so where are their desires? They're all spiritual desires, right? Because the soul is active, we will have desires. We cannot become desire-free. But the point is, what to desire that is good for us. Right? That is the key in knowledge, is to understand what desires are good for us. And what Krishna is explaining here is that these material desires, they lead to great turbulence of thought. They disturb the mind. They disturb the consciousness. And so one who has found fixed consciousness, they have no desires, no material desires. And the second characteristic is they're very happy. They have found perfect happiness. Now this is very counterintuitive, at least in what we are trained and conditioned by society is, what? More material desires, the better, right? And all I have to do is achieve buying this product, achieving this status in society, getting this recognition, getting this new, demonstration of wealth, whatever it might be. Those are all the things that are supposed to give me happiness, right? But we know when we achieve them, do we get the happiness we want? No, we might get it from some short amount of time. But ultimately what happens? We become frustrated. So this is the nature of material desires, right? So Krishna is now describing that the one who is able to withdraw the senses, meaning use the senses in a positive way, use them in spiritual activities, and know that if I use my senses in material activities, it's going to lead to frustration and anxiety and stress and all the things that I'm trying to avoid. Even though it may seem this is the way to go. Right? So now the question becomes, anybody enjoys controlling their senses? Anybody enjoys? No. Okay, so now let us read the 59th verse where Krishna is going to address this point. Somebody wants to read the verse?
Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness.
Okay. Purport?
Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai Ho.
unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyadhara, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc. is recommended for less intelligent person who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things.
Okay. So Krishna says that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. So if we restrict from sense enjoyment, but what remains? If I say I'm going to give up pizza, I am not going to eat pizza anymore.
Still thinking about it.
I'm still thinking about
Desire
it.
is still there.
The desire is still there. The taste for that object is still there. So ultimately what will happen?
I'll take it.
I'll eventually break down. And what will I do? Eat
When?
pizza.
Have it.
Go and have it. Right? That's the nature of restricting material sense enjoyment. It's just the nature, right? And we see it. Typically, in January 1st, what do? We make all these New Year's resolutions, right? I'm not going to eat sweets. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to, call my mother once a day. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to better, right? And by about January 15th, what happens?
Forgotten.
back to normal, right? Right? So this happens. So, Prabhupada gives the example of the patient, right? Does the patient enjoy restricting certain eatables? Right? And eventually they'll go back to it. Right? That's just the nature of restricted sense enjoyment. So nobody wants to be restricted. Nobody likes restrictions. Right? When we were children, we didn't like to be told, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. What do we want to do? We want to do what we want to do. Has that really changed as adults? Has it really changed? Not really. Not really. Right? We maybe have more consciousness and awareness of the results of our actions. Right? I know I want to eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I understand that's not good for me long term, so I make the decision not to. But in the end of the day, we don't like restrictions. Right? So, what to do? And this verse is actually one of the most transformational understandings that we can acquire in our Krishna consciousness. Because we know on paper, in theory, in our own practice, we know that advancing in material things will ultimately lead to our misery. And that's just a reality. It's the sad reality of this material world, but it's the reality. And we've had experience our whole life. And if you want to prove to yourself, just look back. Look back to when you were 5 years old and what kind of desires you had that you thought if you got them, life would be perfect. Then add 5. Look back when you were 10 years old, and then 20 years old, and then 30, and whatever age you are, and see how we have constantly redefined what perfection is for us. And then we can objectively see, actually, none of it leads to what we want. So, our success in life is going to be defined by the extent we stop trying to eat the poison of the material world. There's no better way to put it. Yes, I can sugarcoat things, I can make it, but if you want the blunt, honest truth, that's it. That's the reality. So what to do? Not enjoy anything and just become stones, completely detached from the material world? Is that what Krishna wants us to do? No. So Krishna gives us this very wonderful and perfect formula to make progress in spiritual life. And it proves his ultimate liberal nature towards all of us. It shows how compassionate he is. So let us explore how we go about controlling the senses, and then we'll demonstrate how Krishna is so kind and liberal to all of us. So what is the secret? How to free ourselves from our material desires?
Go towards Krishna.
Go towards Krishna. Okay. And what does going towards Krishna do?
Automatically.
How? How does it automatically free us?
Because we enjoy more in there.
Because we enjoy?
More in there and then rather than material world.
Okay, so we enjoy more there than the material world. Right? So this concept of param drishtva nivartate is higher taste. It is essential in our spiritual understanding. So, for example, I'll often give this example. If you have a $5 bill in your hand, you're not going to give it up. It's $5. But if someone is willing to give you a $10 bill for a $5 bill, you'll take it. Will you hesitate?
No.
Why will you take it?
That is
it has more value. It is more value. So when we choose our activities in this world, we're basically choosing them on that same dynamic, right? I can choose between activity A and activity B. How am I going to choose? Yeah, which is better for me, right? I might choose to go to work, not because I enjoy going to work more than sitting at home watching TV, but why do I choose to go to work?
To earn money.
To earn money. That will then allow me to make other choices. Right? So sometimes we have some interim decisions, but the end goal is what will give me the most happiness. Right? So that $5 bill becomes easily exchangeable only when I get something better. I exchange it for something of more value. Right? So how do you think we're going to lose our material desires?
Not easy.
Not easy, right? But exchanging the $5 bill initially was not easy. But when did it become easy?
When you get a better deal.
When you get a better deal. Right? So how, based on this verse, now what we know, how are we going to become free of material desires? When we go towards Krishna consciousness.
It makes us happy then.
Enjoying the Krishna.
Enjoying the Krishna consciousness, it makes us happy. And so we start trading one activity for another. Right? In your spiritual journey you'll find, I used to do this activity, but I don't do it anymore. Instead I'm doing this. Think back, you all are coming on Friday evenings for Bhagavad Gita discussion. What were you doing previously on Friday evenings? Watching Netflix. Doing some definition, right? Why you all are coming here?
It's more value than watching the Netflix.
You're getting something out of it. There's some positive in it. So making that trade was doable, right? Coming to temple on Sunday, rendering service. Right? What were we used to do on Sundays? Watching Netflix. And now, what are we doing? Rendering some service, enjoying with the devotees, enjoying kirtan, having prasad. Right? So, already we have started to experience this higher taste. Right? So, we hold on to our material desires only because I fear that if I give that up, I'm going to get something less in return. Right? Why else would we hold on to those material desires? Right? I'm only holding on to that $5 bill because I'm not convinced I'm getting a $10 bill in return. Right? So, why? So that's the reason why we hold on to our material desires. So Krishna says that, you just start practicing spiritual life. And by this higher taste, you will naturally lose your taste, Srila Prabhupada says, for pale things. If, I am eating, stale, dry chapatis, but that's all I have, I will enjoy them. And someone says, stop eating them. And you'll say, no. But somebody gives you nice, hot, fluffy, warm, cholesterol-free puris. And then somebody says, now give up your dry, still chapatis. Will you give them up? Definitely. Does it take any effort? No. It doesn't even take any effort. It just happens. That's actually how our material desires dissipate. So whatever we may be so strongly attached to, in reality it pales in comparison to the sweetness of spiritual happiness. And there's a scientific reason why. Who are we? We're spirit souls. The soul is made up of? What is the soul made up of?
Krishna.
Well, it comes from Krishna. And what are the three ingredients of the soul?
Consciousness, memory.
Those are, okay, so intelligence, mind, those are the part of our body, right?
The air, must be air,
Fire,
Agni.
fire, yeah. So that's all part.
That is five.
Yeah. So that's part of the body, right? Yeah. So yeah, right. So that's earth, air, fire, water, ether, right? Those 5 elements. That's what the body is made up of, right? That's the body is made up of, right? And the soul is made up of Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So, fire we can produce materially. Earth we can get from the ground. Air, water. What about Sat, Chit, and Ananda? Those are spiritual elements. You'll not find them on Amazon. You cannot have them delivered next day. It is spirit. So our soul is made up of spirit. There is no matter in it. There's nothing material. So the happiness, the real happiness that we experience, it can only come from spirit. And that is why 100% of the happiness we experience in the material world, it ultimately ends up in frustration, misery. Why? It's temporary. And the soul is searching for something eternal, permanent. So trying to find happiness from that material, it's a fruitless endeavor. Yet we have been taking that endeavor for millions of lifetimes. So we will not find that happiness eternally. Yes, you might find momentary times, but at the end of the day, it doesn't exist. And Krishna says in the 8th chapter, from the highest material planets, we're thinking about, if I just advance my position here, Krishna says, forget about that. Even if you advance yourself to some of the higher heavenly planets, which far beyond what anyone can achieve here on this earthly planet, even that is a place of misery. So we can dream big, but even far beyond what we can achieve, even on this planet, is not anything but Dukhalayam and Shashvatam. So, now that's all the negative. So what to do? So Krishna says, you are spirit soul. Engage in devotional service. Engage in devotional life. And the formula that Krishna gives us, which makes him so merciful. What is the qualification to start devotional life?
Everyone is
Willing to do it. Desire.
Did Krishna say, hey, if you want to take to my devotional service, you must give up all your material desires? Did you say that? You just said, you just start. You add a little bit. You chant my holy names 10 minutes a day. The other 23 hours and 50 minutes, you do what you want. Does anybody else give us that formula? You go to apply for a job, and you get a job. What does that employer require of you?
8 hours plus extra time. 8 hours plus extra time. If possible.
You have to quit your other job and then commit to this new job.
Yeah. No dual employment.
What's that?
No dual employment.
No dual employment. Right? And if you want to work, do you get the idea? Hey, you know what? I want to try out this job for 2 weeks, and then I'll let you know if I want it. Did anybody give you that option? No. You go to buy a house. Does a homeowner say, you know, you stay here for a month. If you like it, then you can buy it? No. No. You sign a contract that for the next 30 years, I'm going to buy this house without even spending one night in it. That's the transaction. You know. Go to a marital relationship. Does anyone say, yeah, you can try it out, you can, you don't have to commit fully? No. It's all or nothing. So every formula we get, but Krishna is so liberal, so kind. He knows we're not prepared to, take at face value that this material sense enjoyment is misery. Because when I say that, I know in all of our minds doubts linger. Well, I don't know. That's not really true. Well, that's natural. But that's the reality. So Krishna says, okay, you just start adding devotional life. And what's going to happen? What's going to happen as we start to practice spiritual life?
Material desires will reduce.
And how will the material desires reduce?
And we'll start enjoying more Krishna consciousness.
We'll start enjoying more Krishna consciousness. As I enjoy more Krishna consciousness, what happens?
My desire for the other things reduces.
As my desires for my other things reduces, what happens?
More Krishna consciousness.
As I do more Krishna consciousness, what happens? Understand how this works? It's just like you have a giant boulder and you want to get it from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. What do you have to do? You carry it all the way down?
Roll it.
You have to push it all the way down?
Just push it in.
Just start it.
Let's start it.
And let gravity take its course. So similarly in spiritual life, just start. Just begin to practice spiritual life. And let the gravity of Param Dristha Nivartate, the higher taste, take us further and further and further and further into devotional life. And so Krishna knows, we're not going to be prepared to, give up all these things we're so attached to on the hope that we'll get something better. So Krishna says, okay, you just start doing something. So the first step in spiritual life is Shraddha, some faith. I have to have some faith to start. That this is a good use of my time. Right now, let me try it. Some faith. After that, through association, we begin to practice spiritual life. And through the practice of spiritual life, what happens? The heart purifies. Heart, when it purifies, then the taste for spiritual activities increases. As that taste increases, one performs more spiritual activities. And the heart further purifies. And as the heart further purifies, the taste increases more. And so Rupa Goswami says, which is something we may all be thinking right now, in the beginning stages, my taste for Krishna consciousness is not param dristva nivartate. Sometimes it is. But sometimes we talk about chanting. And I don't know, I'd rather watch Netflix than chanting around. Well, Srila Rupa Goswami explains that this is the condition of one who has jaundice. When one has jaundice, if they eat a sugar cube, something sweet, how does it taste?
Bitter.
It tastes bitter. Right? But is it bitter?
Yeah.
But it tastes bitter. Why does it taste bitter?
Because you're sick.
You have jaundice. You're sick. And one who has jaundice, if you take a bitter neem leaf and eat the neem leaf. How does that taste? Sweet. Tastes sweet. But is it sweet? So how does the doctor cure jaundice?
Feeding you neem leaves.
Nope. Feeding you sugar cubes.
Sugar cubes.
By eating those sugar cubes,
Sugar cane.
yeah, that's what cures jaundice.
Yeah.
But that tastes bitter.
But that's a cure.
But that's the cure. And soon, how will that sugar cube taste?
Sweet.
Sweet. So Rupa Goswami says, initially, this chanting of the holy names, it tastes bitter.
Yeah.
Actually, it's sweet. What is our jaundiced condition? Avidya. Ignorance. Ignorance of who I am. Who is Krishna? And what is my relationship? This avidya, it makes sometimes the initial practice taste bitter. But just like eating that sugar cube is the cure to jaundice, what is the cure to our avidya? Keep chanting. Keep chanting. And what happens when we keep chanting?
Transition.
Eventually that taste will come to the real taste. Because right now in our avidya condition, all these material sense enjoyments, that tastes sweet.
Yes.
But actually it is bitter neem leaves. But it doesn't taste that good. So through the practice of spiritual life, we'll purify. Through the pursuit of this higher taste, we'll be propelled to go deeper and deeper into spiritual life. And Krishna is so kind. He says, you just give me some amount of your time. He doesn't require, okay, you must first purify fully, then you can take to my devotional service. This is Krishna's ultimate liberal nature. He says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya parayachati. So you just offer to me a leaf, a fruit, a flower, water. With love, I will accept it. So, now, I'll ask one final question. What is the measure of our progress in spiritual life? How do I know if I'm making progress or not? Sometimes we may wonder that question. Is it based on how many verses of Bhagavad Gita you've memorized? Is it based on how straight your tilak is when you put it on? Is it based on how many, how nicely you speak
Desires to
bhajan?
materialistic world, I guess.
Oh.
Less angry. When the stage comes when we are having no materialistic desires left, I think we are progressing to
Yes,
that divine position.
that's exactly right. Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur says that you can measure your progress in devotional service by how much my material desires are reducing. So you can look at this, you can't look at material desires in daily increments, but you can look maybe 6 months from ago. Okay, 6 months ago, did I have more or less material desires? If I have less today than I did 6 months ago, okay, I'm making some progress. Continue doing what you're doing, increase what you're doing. And looking in that realm, you can really gauge your progress. And he gave the story of how material desires ultimately become our limiting force in progress. I've told the story of the wedding party going to a trip. No? So the groom's party group was, going to a wedding, and so they had to take an overnight boat trip. And so they reached to the shore of the river, and they hired one boatman. They said, okay, we're all going to sleep. You take us down to the city. You row the boat and take us to the city where the wedding is taking place overnight, and we'll reach in the morning, and we'll attend this wonderful wedding function. So everybody found their spot on the boat, and they took rest, and the boatman was rowing and rowing and rowing all night. And when the sun came up in the morning, they looked out and they realized, wait a minute, we haven't gone anywhere. And they became very upset at the boatman. They said, "What? Why haven't you done your job?" He says, "I don't know. I've been rowing all night. Look at me. I'm sweating, dripping in sweat. I'm exhausted. I've been rowing all night." And I thought, let us see what happened. And they looked around and they found out that nobody untied the boat from the shore. They're rowing, but they made no progress. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, this is our material attachments. It keeps us stuck where we are. Sometimes we can even practice all our spiritual practices, but if we don't start to reduce our material desires, we'll not make actual progress. So the progress in our spiritual life is measured by how much material desires I am reducing. And have realistic goals. Don't think, okay, in 3 months I'm going to be 100% free of all my material desires. That's not going to happen. It can. It actually can if we are really committed. But realistically, because we have not full faith yet, it's not. So we can make progress. And Krishna's ultimately recommended, and through Acharya say, how to make it? Just add a little bit more spiritual practice to your life. By adding spiritual practice to your life, you're automatically going to remove some material desires, because you have only 24 hours in a day. And so, if you want to really do this, increase your chanting. Whatever you are chanting today, increase your chanting. In increments, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks. Not much longer than that though. Increase your chanting. And come to at least a minimum, an absolute minimum, 16 rounds of chanting. Even that is less than 10% of your day. It takes less than 2 hours. It's about 8% of your day. Seems like, oh, I can't. 92% you can do other things. You give that much and you see how your life improves, how your state of consciousness improves. So we have to put forth some effort with some faith. So start there. Of course, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, attending Bhakti Viksha, coming to the temple on Sundays. These are the 3 kind of main pillars of our spiritual journey. And if we do it, then we'll find success. And whatever material desires remain, we will easily lose them. We'll not have to work so hard to get rid of them. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada. Any comments, questions, reactions? Yes.
One question.
Yes.
See, we're talking about material desires to give up the materialistic world, give up the material desires. Now, hadn't been for this material desire, this world would not have progressed where we are today. It is very essential for the mankind, the progress of mankind as well as progress of the world. We have to have this material desire, some desire to bring our country up, the GDP going up, all that is needed. Of course, the spiritual way of going to spiritual life is also required, but giving up materialistic desires will not help us in the progress of the country and ourselves. So, what is the way out? We have to have the desires.
Okay. So, we all want to progress. Anybody doesn't want to progress? No. Okay. So we all want to progress. The only question is, how to progress and are we progressing? So you said that all this advancement and progress has occurred. What progress has occurred? what progress has occurred in the world in the last 50 years?
We got we got automobiles, we got electricity, we got nuclear, I would say, energy to we get gas, gasoline, petrol, so that we can travel.
Okay.
We got airplanes,
Okay.
agriculture, we
Transport, the
we
roads,
can
buildings.
more or less technology.
Okay.
We had modernity in agriculture, so that we can
Okay.
feed across the world.
Okay. Okay.
We
So
had
let's.
jobs.
All right. Good. So we have lots of those, right? But not one of those. Not everything I heard so far. Nothing is talked about us. So we have cars. We have faster cars. But do we have better life because of those cars? You said we have
That's peaceful life.
advancement in agriculture. Right? We have advancement in agriculture.
Yeah.
Do we have better foods?
There's more diseases.
We have more diseases. We have more medicine. More medicine should mean
More diseases.
less disease, right? More medicine should be less disease. Do we have less disease today? We have more things.
To ease our life.
We have more things to ease our life. Do we have an easier life today than 50 years ago?
So easier life back.
Do we have more time today than we did 50 years ago? We have all these things that supposedly are going to ease our life. Right? We can get from point A to point B faster. We can get information much more easily. We can just simply pick up my cell phone and call somebody versus having to go to an actual telephone. All these things, a microwave, a dishwasher, right? They're all supposed to make our lives easier, give us more time. Do we actually? Has that been the result of that advancement?
I think that is the point of getting detached from the materialistic desire, because people, those who actually want Krishna to feel within,
Yeah.
the objective, the aim. So, if that is the ambition that I want to feel Krishna within, then all these things come ultimately the materialistic desires.
If you look, and let's look at some proof of that. If you look at the time when Lord Ram was ruling, did they have big superhighways? Was there internet? 5G? At least 3G was there at the time? Did they have nuclear energy? Did they have sophisticated industrial farming? Do you know that during his reign, nobody got sick? He had a policy that anybody in the kingdom had any complaint, they could come and lodge that complaint directly to him. Any leader of any country of the world has that type of policy? Why?
We don't have time.
The line would be out the door and around the corner. They'd have no time. The whole community was fully happy and peaceful. There was no crime. Meaning nobody taking somebody else's property that wasn't theirs.
There was no logs that time.
There were not, because everybody was satisfied with what they had. And that was on the basis of a spiritual culture. So my only question is, there's clearly been an extraordinary amount of effort and endeavor to attempt to make progress. And certainly, There's so much technology that is advanced in society. And we came to a really nice comprehensive list of them. But my only question is, has the person behind all of those things progressed? Do we have less mental distress today than there was 50 years ago? Do we have less disease? Do we have more closer relationships with our family and with our society? Do we have more principled ways of life? So that advancement that we are searching for, the goal is right, but the means by which we're achieving it, it's not going to happen.
And the other thing is not individual progress.
Yeah, it's definitely societal progress. So these material desires are not, the material is not going to lead to what we want. So to make a better world for all of us, it starts with a spiritual consciousness. That's what's going to progress the world. Not more gadgets and gizmos.
Well, I believe that when you start this journey, it, as you said, that it purifies your heart.
Yeah.
And when it purifies your heart, a righteousness comes into your heart and the kindness comes into your heart. I'll answer this question while reading out the quote of Dr. Abdul Kalam, which he said in UN meeting. He said that where there is a righteousness, kindness in the heart, there is a beauty in the character.
In the character.
And when there is a beauty in the character, there is a harmony in the home. And when there is a harmony in the home, there is order in the nation.
Yeah.
And when there is order in the nation, there is a peace in the world.
100%.
So that's actually, righteousness affects the world.
And how do you imagine a society where there was no greed, where there was no anger, where there was no lust, anger, and greed. Anybody wants to live in a world like that? Are we alone? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, lust, anger, and greed, these are the three gateways to hell. And what do we see increasing every day in society? These three things only. And the only means to purify, to become free of this, is a spiritual life. We can read all kinds of self-help books. We can read all kinds of motivational quotes and inspirations and be determined, yes, I want to be less greedy, I want to be less angry. It won't happen until we start to purify the heart. And so when the whole world has these spiritual qualities, because these are actually the natural qualities of the spirit soul. To be magnanimous, to be loving to all, to be generous, to be caring, to have all of these are the natural qualities. They emerge in the spiritual life. But by trying to advance in material life, all we are doing is actually adding more contamination. And so the whole of our existence enhances. And Krishna says even that, even a small percentage of the world becomes spiritually inclined, the whole world benefits. Not just us as individuals. So that's how, these material desires actually,
I think
they don't advance us.
No,
But hold on one second. But what will advance is sharing this knowledge of actually how to find this real peace and happiness. And Krishna doesn't say that you abandon all of these available facilities in the material world. Well, it says you use them. But you use them for the right goal. Use them to advance the spiritual consciousness of society. Because if you do, then you're actually going to solve these problems, and you're going to have less disease, you're going to have better mental health, you're going to have more values in society, you're going to have better relationships. But if you use these material facilities simply to eat, sleep, mate, and defend, it's not going to drive happiness.
And as I said, material advancement, if we are using for Vaishnava Vrinda, to all our brothers and sisters, and people automatically come, like we are using that electric cooker there. It is used to make a beautiful prasad. We are using the technology, there to reach more people.
Absolutely.
Automatically, if it is done for Krishna.
I just flew on an airplane to go see, the Holy Dham. Material technology is great. I use it every day. It's great, but we have to use it for the right purpose. Right? So that's how we're going to progress in the world. Right? So it's got to be tied back to our spiritual journey, and we have proof of it. There's been actually more advancement in material realms in the last 50 years than over the prior 300 years. If you look at the rate of advancement in medicines and transportation and technology and natural resource uses, all these things. But you also see there is an advancement, there's an acceleration of the degradation of society. It's accelerating at a scary clip. I mean, having just come back from India, just the things I see that's changing over the last 10 years, it's just scary. It's scary to see, our traditional Vedic culture was so wholesome and pure, and it's deteriorating at a rapid clip. It's sad. That's the reality. So, any other comments or questions?
But the lifespan has definitely increased due to the medical science which has come into. Earlier, the fatalities were child mortality was a rate of child mortality in earlier days quite a lot. But all those things have come down a little.
It does not. Just a study came out last week that the mortality rate of up to the age of 18 is actually declined due to drug abuse, violence, and infant mortality rate is actually declined if what you must do count and include the number of abortions that take place in the world. Actually, infant mortality rate is declining. The potential is better because of medicine, but because of other actions we are taking, it is actually declining. And in Shastra, in 12th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains, do you know what the lifespan will be by the end of Kali Yuga? So we're about 5,500 years into Kali Yuga. At the beginning of Kali Yuga, the lifespan is 100 years. By the end of Kali Yuga, you know what the lifespan will be? 20. That is how because the foodstuffs will become so degraded. We talk about advancement in agriculture. Don't get me started on genetically modified foods. But the disaster that's creating for our health, it's absolutely catastrophic. The factory farming, catastrophic. Picking fruits before they're ripe so that they can show up on our shelves nice and green, catastrophic. But that's what's happening. So the lifespan is going to decrease, and it's actually happening. If you actually look at the studies, life expectancy is declining around the world.
They're living longer, but they're not living healthy.
They're not even living longer. They're not living better, for sure.
Yeah, not living
But
better.
they're also statistically, the actual life expectancy is declining. That's how difficult it's become. So, that's where, again, we have to what's the definition of success? We talked about this in the very first. What is the goal of our life every day?
To be
Happiness.
Okay, that's it. Keep that as the definition.
Contentment.
And stop defining it by these other things, because we can measure progress of an economy by GDP, but you cannot measure progress of a country by GDP. You can measure progress of a country by, are they happier? Are people actually happier? That's progress. So
That is why for me the happiness index, which ratings come, Bhutan is the country, they are the happiest people in the world, with the lowest GDP.
Maximum people from India, they are taking the citizenship of other nations,
Yeah.
leaving India. This
Yeah.
is the fact of today. If I talk about my country,
yeah,
we all are here.
yeah,
This is the example.
Yeah.
An example. We're not in our country.
and
It's obviously a sensitive topic, but if people were happy and not frustrated and not insensitive, so many of shooting incidents and those kind of violence crimes that we hear about would not happen. Like, did they happen 50 years ago? No.
why is it sensitive? That's exactly right. It's uncontrolled senses that is leading to these mass calamities. Look, gun control, whether you believe it or not, is not going to solve this. What's going to solve it? Sense control. Sense control is what's going to stop this madness and absolute disaster. That's what's going to stop it, right? And just like medical science isn't going to solve disease, what's going to solve disease? Purification of the heart. That's going to solve disease. Right? So, and that's how we can measure progress in society, right? How much of these, heinous crimes are happening? Families being broken by, just bad circumstances. These things, all the tragedies we see around us. That's how we should measure whether we're progressing or not.
I feel like whenever we hear about such things, the first question that comes to mind is not how did they get a gun. The first question, what were they even thinking?
Yeah, why?
Why?
What circumstances led to the consciousness to become such degraded, right? And it's not just that individual. It's the whole surroundings that's contributing to that, right? It's the surroundings that's contributing to that. And so that's where we have to, it's just like, cleaning up the environment. How are we going to clean the environment? First, cleaning the heart. If I have a greed for products, well, companies will find a way to make it irregardless of what it does to pollute the environment. Simple fact. Right? If I want an eating plate that's disposable, well, then they'll make it. Or if I take a plate that I can wash and reuse, it's better for the environment, right? It's simple things, Do you really need a paper napkin every time you eat? It's a wasteful resource. It's a wasted resource. We should be wise to know how to use. I visited one farm in India, in Vrindavan. This devotee is making this, nice farm. And he's building these houses. And I said, are you going to have running water? He said, no. I said, I like that. It's interesting. He's like, if you have to carry, and they have a water, it's not that far. But if you carry your water from there to your home, guess what?
You would use wisely.
Use your water wisely. We don't use our water wisely. Why? Just turn it on and it comes. We don't value it. If you had to pedal a bike to generate power for your home and store it, would you leave that refrigerator open, and go take a phone call and then come back and close it?
Yeah. We'll have only one light on right now. Brightening the whole
That's
thing.
right.
Just to see your face.
We still remember those times when water used to come for like 2 hours in the morning or 2 hours in the evening, and we would remember that okay, the drum is full, and now let's just take half. Our kids will not know that. That generation will not know that.
No, only somebody who's lived it. And what's amazing for me, I'll just have my own experience. Like when he said that, it changed my use of water when I went to because I just thought about I don't need this water on right now or whatever. Like it changes how you think about things. So
Prabhuji, I lived my childhood touching the water from the hand pump from like 200 meters and bringing up like 2 floors up. And still today, if I see somebody is brushing and opening the tap, I still get furiated.
yeah,
How can you waste? I go and turn it off.
yeah,
That's like-
because you have experience of it. But that's valuable experience that we don't have in society with the advancement of technology to bring water. We have lost the advancements of consciousness. That this is a precious resource, just like everything else. So again, it's purifying the heart of these impurities that's actually going to purify society, bring peace to the true United Nations cause. As soon as I, me, and mine, you can never unite nations. When we all understand we are all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, then you can find actual united people working for the same cause.
Maybe the schools should start having a class, depending on their own faith and other thing. Religious studies is completely out of the education system.
What have schools done over the last 100 years?
They just took up.
They've taken all spiritual knowledge out of the school.
Yes. That's very essential part of the education.
They've taken it all out. It's the most insane decisions. I'm sorry, I'm getting very, but it's absolute lunacy. Because you've taken, I gave a class at this Bhaktivedanta Gurukul in Vrindavan, and I was so inspired. It was amazing. Because these kids were learning math, science, English, and all of this, but they were learning Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita. They were and I said, you guys are acquiring character. Everybody's going to know math, science, English in the world, but you're acquiring character that will help you make a difference in the world. And go use that to go change the world. Because our education system is completely stripped it of all of this stuff. And in fact, they've gone so far as to they've discouraged it. Not only have they become neutral to it, they've actually discouraged it. And it's absolute insanity. Because this is, we might become expert mathematicians and historians and scientists, but with no character, the application of that knowledge leads to destruction of society. Any other? We all
During
have
our time, when we were small, there was a subject, moral science.
moral science.
Moral science,
Yeah.
which was part and parcel of our regular periods. But we used to have exam on moral science, but the marks were not added to the aggregate. So, but we had to study that. We had to prepare for the exam. But that moral science disappeared. Completely disappeared from all schools. I don't find it anywhere.
No.
Even during my children's time, the moral science had already disappeared.
And I used to go to school every day, like 15-20 minutes. We used to chant all these mantras and everything, like 15-20 minutes. We were doing the same thing.
Sanskrit in our school, like we read all those
compulsory
classes.
subject, right?
It was a
CBSE.
Yeah, I'm talking about Hindi medium, pure Hindi medium, Saraswati Shishu Mandir. Like we used to read all those mantras, and we used to do like Akhand Ramaya Path and everything. We used to do.
That's good.
In our school.
Okay, it is Hindi medium, so they are good. But I am talking about convent. In CBSE, Sanskrit was, mandatory.
Yeah.
That is actually.
In class 8th or 10th.
Till
I studied in Gurukul where this meditation was part of the education. There was a separate session we do it.
Yeah.
So I think that I was lucky in that, but I don't see this in
and so we've modernized, but we've actually degraded. We've degraded it. I mean, if you just look very black and white, the quality of character that we're producing, and so the character education happens what? Friday nights here. It happens in the temple. It happens at home. I mean, that's where the character education. But unfortunately, because parents are too busy, because we're, all these other things, the time to character educate also has become. And we used to have, joint families where, there was character happening through osmosis, right? Just being absorbed in these environments. But now we've become so isolated in our family units that character osmosis also changes. So, it again, advancement. We have bigger homes and fewer people living in them, right? We have more communication tools, but we have less people communicating. I mean, it's crazy.
It's so unfortunate to see that we talk about Friday evening here like this versus when we compare it to India now, the Friday evenings or Saturday evenings have just become a synonymous of spend your time in the bar and just drink alcohol.
Every
It's just
corporate
become a
person is
synonymous
drinking,
of it.
partying.
Any picture that I see on Instagram from my friends or
Yeah.
anybody I know, it's just that lifestyle.
That's today's Indian culture.
But I will tell you, let me give you some good news. But I'll give,
Not spending time there, you're anti-social.
but I'll give you some good news. I'll tell you, in the last 15 years,
They used to do all kirtan.
the temples in India are growing like anything. And what I'm very encouraged by is the amount of youth in Vrindavan on Saturday evenings and Sundays. It is jam-packed, all with young people.
Yes, that's true.
People travel.
They are coming from, particularly from Delhi, so they're traveling and making a weekend. And it is so inspiring to see all these young, big groups of kids having fun, singing and dancing, having prasadam, and enjoying our spiritual culture. And so I have some hope, because I didn't see this 10 to even 12 years ago. I'm seeing now recently, and I was in Delhi on Thursday, my Nrsimha Chaturdasi. There was lines for 8 hours, continuous to take darshan, and it's all people coming, and all community people. These aren't congregation devotees; these are just general public. So there's some undercurrent of positivity that hopefully can come, because look, the solution is here. Just by proper understanding the spiritual nature, this can turn very quickly. While it's very dire and dark, the solution is there. All right, shall we chant so we can? Shall Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.